Chapter 6. James. It was game time. The last week of November was over, and Alice's big project was about to begin. She wasn't my only client, but I'd cleared my calendar for the Christmas season to focus on her. There were 2 Christmas weddings we were hosting, but my partners were handling those. I would be around for consultation since I wasn't actually going anywhere, but with an event almost every day for the entire month, Alice's job took priority. The 1st of December, I had arranged to be at her office by 10. She opened at 8, and we were planning to roll out the news to her employees around 11. That gave me an hour to set up before the first event. It wasn't much time, and so I decided to ignore Alice's suggestion and get there half an hour earlier. I brought 2 of my helpers with me. They were both straight out of college and eager for experience. We didn't pay them a fortune, and they didn't have any creative input. Mostly they hauled things and helped stage props and build scenes. There were 6 guys like them on staff who were available to work on any project. They met me at a tree yard at 7, where I purchased a dozen trees. We loaded them into a truck and drove to Alice's building. In the back was a small courtyard between her office and the one next door. It was the perfect location for outdoor events, hidden from the public and accessible through the parking lot. I bought the stands along with the trees so that all we had to do was arrange them. We threw some decorative skirts around the bottom to class them up, some white as snow, some red as cherries. One of the guys dragged a scraggly-looking tree out of the back and gave me an odd look. "Why'd you pick this one?" he asked. "Just for fun," I replied. The tree hung sadly to one side, several of its branches missing. Tucked in among the others, it gave the scene a whimsical look, as if every tree was invited to the party, no matter how ugly. Finishing that off, I had the stagers carry boxes of decorations into the building, up the stairs to Alice's office. She stood up, surprised at our intrusion. Checking my watch, I saw that it was already well past 10. I had been right to get a jump on the morning's work. If I'd shown up as expected, we would have been behind the 8 ball. "I thought you weren't coming," she said, making room on the conference table for a few of the boxes. "I got here early," I told her. "No, you weren't," she argued. I gave her a knowing smile. "Just wait." She didn't like that one bit. She wanted to know exactly where I was and what I was doing on her property, and the idea of a surprise was difficult to swallow. I didn't want to explain what I had done. It would ruin the magic. Part of my job was creating special moments and keeping people in the dark until the final reveal was important. "What are these?" she asked, pointing to the boxes. "You'll see," I said mischievously. "You're going to make me regret ever hiring you," she warned. "Yes, and you're going to regret it all month long," I promised. She pouted, giving up. This is what she'd paid me to do, and I was doing it. There wasn't much she couldn't fault me for. I'd shown her most of my plans, keeping a few aces up my sleeves. I just hadn't shared the entire schedule, so she knew most of the activities, just not the order in which they would occur. I wanted to impress her along with her staff. She deserved as much Christmas cheer as the rest of them, and I was determined to deliver. We had about a half hour until 11, so I went back to the truck with my stagehands. "You can come back around noon," I said. "Sure thing, boss." They climbed back into the truck and drove off. I saw a woman going into the office across the courtyard admiring the view. She saw me looking and favored me with a wild grin. Not only were Alice and I making life a little bit more special for her employees, but we were cheering up the whole office complex. Nothing said Christmas more than a pop-up tree sale. I hoped that Shipping Magic's workers would be equally as impressed. It was time. I walked back inside to find Alice on the first floor, surrounded by her staff. Everyone was on their feet, collected on one side of the room. They were chatting amongst themselves, clearly eager to hear what Alice had to say. She glanced at me and nodded, ready to get down to business. "May I have your attention, please?" she asked the room. Conversations quieted, and everyone turned their eyes toward her. "I know the next 4 weeks are going to be hard. I want to thank you for sticking with me and giving it your all," Alice began. No one reacted, apparently expecting some kind of acknowledgement of the trials ahead. "I'd like to make this a fun place to work, a place where you go not only because you're being paid, but also because you're excited about what the day will bring." She flashed a brilliant smile and turned to me. "This is James Garrett of First Stars and Pixie Dust. They're a party planning company," I interrupted her. "Event consultation service." She stared at me as if I'd just shot her dog. Event consultation service, she repeated coolly. Anyway, he's here to make work magical for the entire Christmas season. Thank you, Alice. I took over the stage, clapping her on the back as if we were old friends. She frowned, struggling to contain her irritation. In retrospect, I probably should have been more deferential, treating her like the queen she wanted to be. But I was in my element and ready to get going. She was just holding me back with kind words about how much she wanted people to enjoy themselves. It was time to start the first event so that people could actually have a good time instead of just talking about it. Let's have a round of applause for Alice, I said loudly, pointing my clapping hands at her. The room responded with polite applause, causing Alice to blush. If anything, it was worse than cutting her off. When I caught her eyes, she was staring at me like a balloon she wanted to pop. I winked at her and kept going. Alice has just arranged for you to have a Christmas-themed experience almost every day this month. We'll be drinking hot chocolate, decorating trees, ice skating, you name it. And those are only some examples. I'm not going to tell you the rest so that you have the bonus of being surprised each day. Someone raised their hand. When are we going to work? The crowd laughed. The events are going to be at different times. Alice stepped forward to answer. But I assure you, there will be plenty of time for work. People groaned. Your first surprise starts right now, I said, elevating the mood in the office by 1,000 degrees. People cheered and clapped, and I caught Alice smiling. This was what she wanted, a satisfied crew that was willing to put in the time without feeling overwhelmed. I led them all out into the courtyard, and they erupted with joy to discover the miniature tree farm. A few enterprising people darted in between pines, scoping out their options. A few hung back, unsure what the parameters of the activity were. I walked right into the middle of the group and laid the ground rules. You're picking 2 trees per floor and 1 for the shop. I looked over at Alice, standing back from the crowd, watching with satisfaction. And you get 1 for your office because you're the boss. She scrunched up her beautiful nose at me, clearly miffed that I was taking charge. But she moved forward to join her employees as they evaluated the different trees. I heard dozens of conversations ranging from how long the needles were to how many branches were optimal for a Christmas tree. One sour woman began complaining the mess the trees were going to make. Her companion listened politely and then left to join the cool kids. I walked over to her, maintaining a friendly distance. Would you prefer an artificial tree? I asked conspiratorially, as if I was selling it on the back market. Oh, yes, she cried. I just might have 1 for you. I winked. Meet me back in the office at high noon. She laughed, and I could tell we were off to a great start. Everyone was enjoying themselves, even Alice, wandering studiously around one tree after another, looked like she was having a good time. I dropped the act for just a moment and went to help her. Let me know which one you want, I said. I can handle it, she replied stiffly. I know you can handle it, I shot back. I'm just saying I'll be happy to move a tree for you. Stop it, James, she snapped, giving me what was probably meant to be a light shove. There was more force in it than she expected, and while I was fine, she lost her balance. Instead of crashing into me, she veered left at the last moment and fell into a Christmas tree. Instinctively, I reached out to help her, intending to swoop her back onto her feet. But the angle at which she was traveling was awkward, and I lost my own footing. We both went down into the same tree, crashing to the ground in a mess of pine needles and branches. She rolled off in one direction, and I came to rest on the opposite side. I lay there for a moment, unable to understand how it had happened. It was the stupidest thing, but I couldn't help thinking it was punishment for getting involved with my ex. Alice popped back up, brushing herself off. I'm all right, she announced. The workers weren't sure whether they were allowed to laugh or not. A few hid chuckles behind their hands, while the rest pretended not to notice. I climbed to my feet, shaking my head. That was what I got for trying to be helpful. I grabbed the tree off the ground and hauled it toward the office. Alice followed, keeping her mouth shut. We were dangerously close to causing a scene, and that wasn't at all what I wanted for the rollout of the month. I knew the employees needed a little bit of space to poke fun at us. They clearly liked Alice, but she was still the boss. No woman is completely comfortable around authority figures, no matter how friendly they are. I stood back to let her open the door and walk the tree inside and up the stairs. She didn't say a word, apparently deciding that it wasn't worth arguing anymore. Setting the tree down just inside her office, I grabbed one of the boxes and took it back downstairs. She picked up a box herself to lend a hand, and together we moved the decorations down to the main floor. By the time we rejoined the rest of the folks outside, people were relaxed and enjoying themselves. A few of the men carted the chosen trees across the courtyard, leaving a handful of the rejects behind. The comical tree I'd selected to round out the illusion remained, slightly bent and pitiful among the rest. We arranged the trees in places where everyone would be able to enjoy them. My 2 helpers returned just in time with the artificial tree I'd promised. I introduced them to the woman who was worried about mess, and she was delighted when they began setting it up right outside her cubicle. Everything was going well, and it was time to start decorating. I placed 1 box near every tree for easy access, noticing that a few of them were already open. I had specifically told my people to seal the boxes so that the contents would be a surprise. They'd had no reason not to follow my orders, so that left only one culprit. Alice had had the boxes alone in her office for at least an hour. She was probably the one who opened them. It was starting to seem like we were on opposing teams, rather than working together for the benefit of her employees. She was in the shop talking to a few of the customers when I found her. The tree we'd selected for the front office stood in the corner, looking naked without its lights. "Should we start decorating?" I asked. "Yes," she agreed, ending her conversation. There was one other employee with us, in addition to the seasonal workers behind the counter. I stood back to watch as she reached into the box, pulling out a tangled knot of lights. They hadn't been that way when I'd packed them. Some of the lights were brand new, still wound around their cardboard inserts. The ones I was reusing had been carefully packed away, free from tangles so that my customers can enjoy the activity. But these lights had mysteriously managed to fold in on themselves, creating a nasty ball of electricity. Alice handed it to me unceremoniously, as if she were deposing a screaming baby in my arms. "Have fun with that," she said, walking away. I looked at the lone employee I was left with, struggling to maintain my cool. Okay, Alice had just declared war in the middle of the first day. I could deal with that. If she wanted a fight, I could give her a run for her money. It looked like my bid to maintain friendly relations was out the door. Instead, we were going to be nipping at each other's heels. That was fine. She was paying me enough to take a certain amount of heat. The customers waiting in line laughed, and I suppose it was good for business. Behind the counter, the 2 kids taping packages shut grinned. At least my misfortune was bringing smiles to everyone else's faces. I started to unravel the knot when a 10-year-old girl left her mother and came to help me. Together, we made short work of the problem and strung the lights before she had to go. Alice's plan had backfired, if she meant to give me a headache. Instead of ruining the event, she'd only made it that much more special for the customers in line. After the lights were up, I left the employee to hang balls and tinsel. Walking back into the office, I found a whole group of people clustered around one tree and suggested that a few of them go help out in the shop. With the addition of a few well-decorated trees, the place was suddenly transformed into a Christmas palace. I glanced up the stairs and saw Alice working on her own tree. It was hard to stay mad at her. My first event had been a success, providing her staff with a bonding activity, brightening her customers' day, and even giving her something soothing to focus on. I left them all to it, walking back outside to pack up the rest of the trees with my crew.